So just hang tight for a few minutes. Okay. Welcome to Rebel Dharma Wednesday night. Glad you guys are here. Those of you in the room, those of you on Zoom, those of you in the future land, and yeah, here we are. Just to say a little bit about, what I teach is really kind of Buddhism, mostly Buddhism 101. Although my background is both in clinical psychology and Buddhist psychology, studying both formally trained as a Dharma meditation teacher, but also really did a kind of a deep dive into non-Western philosophy. So I've really, that's actually kind of what sparked the whole thing, like non-Western philosophy, and really seeing Taoism and Hinduism and Buddhism and all the different aspects of Buddhism. And then some other, I really got into kind of anthropology, and they all just kind of, it was just more and more inquiry. And I eventually just kind of landed with Theravada Buddhism, what's called Vipassana. The word Vipassana means insight. So this is often considered an insight meditation practice, which I think is really fitting, because what we're trying to do here is gain insight into the habits of mind and gain insight into the nature of reality. So that's it. Pretty simple. So glad you're here. Is there anyone new? Anyone new in the room? Anyone new on the Zoom that wants to introduce yourself? You can unmute yourself. By the way, we're trying the text for folks. I don't know if it's possible to make it bigger or smaller, but hopefully it's useful. If you guys want to keep your keep it muted, and then you can just read if you want to. Anyway, anyone want to introduce themselves? All right. Most of the people in the room have been here. It's like most of the people in both rooms have been here. So good to see you all again. Let's go ahead. Let's meditate. I'm going to meditate for a bit. I have some things I want to say, but I feel like to not get riled up, let's settle, actually. Because that's one of the aspects of this practice, is to learn to settle the mind. That's good to do when perhaps there's been a lot going on throughout the day. Our mind has been pretty damn active. We're not trying to disconnect from our thoughts or stop thinking. That's actually inaccurate. Instead, we're trying to really just bring the attention elsewhere. It's kind of a good way to think about it. So let's go ahead and just settle in for some practice. It's helpful to allow the eyes to close, although it's not necessary. It is helpful. Some people, especially if you're really sleepy, prefer to have their eyes kind of slightly open, like allowing some light in, maybe slightly downcast, so you're not looking around, or just allowing them to close. Even with the eyes closed, there's shapes and there's different lights. Eyes are still seeing. And then opening up to the different sounds. Sound of my voice, sounds in the room, sounds outside the room, the bell. And then perhaps aiming the attention towards this experience of sitting, the body, the sensations, perhaps the pressure, maybe the feet on the floor or the butt on the cushion or the chair, the upright posture, just awareness of the body sitting. Settling in to the here and now. De-emphasizing the compulsion of the mind to think, to chase every thought, to understand, to future plan. Just here, this body, this breath. It's helpful to have an anchor, whether that anchor be the breath or somewhere in the body, a place to come back to again and again. A couple suggestions: tip of the nose, the upper lip, focusing in on the sensations there, coolness of the inhale, the warmth of the exhale. Another suggestion for An anchor is to drop the attention down to the abdomen, resting the attention just above the belly button. Feeling the expansion and contraction, the rise and fall of each breath. These are 2 suggestions. Of course, find what works best for you. The invitation is to return again and again to hear this breath, this sitting, breathing body. Whenever we find that the attention has wandered off, with that sense of friendliness or kindness with the mind, just aiming the attention back, returning to the anchor here, now. allowing the mind to settle. Like a still forest pool. Of course, thoughts, feelings, memories will arise. It's not a problem. It's just what's happening. What's also happening is this body is sitting and breathing and being. Can you rest there? returning again and again to this meditative anchor. Just recognizing perhaps where the attention has gone, future or past. Or just simply labeling it thinking or planning or remembering. And then back to here. This breath, this sitting, breathing body, awake. The invitation, whenever we recognize that the attention has wandered off, is while returning, checking in. What's happening here? Was there something in the body or in the emotional body? Or was there a particular thought that arose where the mind jumped? Coming back again and again, softening into the breath, into the body, and just asking, what's happening here? See what arises. What can be known? The invitation is to soften and widen. Soften the heart, soften the focus, soften the belly, and widen our awareness beyond this body, beyond the physical structure, perhaps the space around you. So open up for any thoughts, questions, anything about the instruction. Kept it pretty simple tonight, and in the line of, I just got rid of my, in the line of mindfulness. Please, Mike.
I just appreciated your directions at the beginning because I think I'm often contending with like how to think about the not thinking component, or how exactly to frame that. And like, I know it's not to be so resistant to thinking, but to try to think of a way to envision that. And I liked how you said it's just about focusing the attention elsewhere. So don't spend too much time, energy, or effort on like, don't think, I'm not thinking. Don't focus on that, because then that becomes its own pitfall.
Right.
But to just be like, that's okay if thoughts arise. Just try to look elsewhere. It's helpful.
It's a fucking thought machine. Like, that's its job. It's just doing what it's been doing all day and our whole life. So yeah, no, I find that to be a helpful frame as well. That we're just reorienting. Oh, breath. Oh, that's here too. We're breathing all day since our birth date, first breath, to our last breath. We're breathing constantly. But how often are we aware of it? Usually not, because we're, especially as adults or young adults, so just conditioned. Yeah. Yeah. And there's something actually, I mean, there's the kind of physiological component is that there's something about settling the nervous system that is involved with de-emphasizing the thinking mind and literally dropping from the kind of cortex to the limbic system and the pons. The pons is basically your brainstem, which all your functions, like all of the autonomic systems are happening in the very base of your brain. This is their life, heart beating, lungs breathing, everything, blood flowing, all of it. And so what we're kind of trying to do is literally, and so much of meditation is like this. It's about de-emphasizing these kind of larger portions of our brain, and in doing that, by bringing the attention inward, we are naturally shifting from a sympathetic stress response to a parasympathetic peaceful response, or mindful response. It's just super helpful. But it's not, we're not like bad brain, because you're doing your job, Yeah. Which I had to work on for a long time, because I like probably many people have a highly critical mind, internally and externally. Oftentimes, the more critical that we are internally, the more judgmental that we are internally, that naturally spills out into being judgmental of everyone and everything in the world. We become hypercritical. And then that loops back around on ourselves. And it's just a shitty feedback loop. So we're not trying to stop the mind, but we are trying to see, oh, wow, there's this tendency, there's these habits, there's this certain, like sometimes getting really quiet, and then just something pops into the mind from nowhere, and then it's like, where did that come from? And then we just, it's just the mind. I mean, there is some exploration that can be done, But for the most part, especially in the beginning, that the term mindfulness, the Buddhist word for mindfulness is sati. And sati literally means to remember. And there's two ways I like to think about this. To remember, like attach our attention to our member, this physical form, to coming back. And then remembering, like, oh, the mind wandered off, and then, oh, remembering, oh, here. So there's the kind of the two, and they're happening at the same time. But that's why it's so much about being embodied. Mindfulness is so much connected to feeling embodied in the here and now. And the more mindful that we are and embodied in the here and now, then hopefully the more calm and collected and then insightful we can be. So thanks for bringing that up. Anything else? Please.
What do you do when your foot falls asleep?
Mm-hmm. Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being a little tingly, 10 being throbbing and you feel like you're going to lose your leg, like it's going to just atrophy and die.
Yeah.
Where are you at?
An 8, so I have to get up.
Uh-huh. Yeah, great.
But
Good thing you didn't fall.
But I meditatively walked.
Uh-huh.
I felt like it was going to explode. Well, what do you do? Because I'm sure that you sit for a lot longer than I can sit.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, I don't know. My leg's asleep right now. I couldn't move if I wanted to. I mean, what you did is fine. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's kind of two ways to think about it. One is to investigate, right? So the question, sorry, just to kind of reiterate, the question was, what do you do when your leg falls asleep? Or really any kind of sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. But really the unpleasant. The neutral, it's just, usually we're not paying attention to what's neutral, actually. But I would say to begin to watch it, just investigate what's happening here. And then watch maybe your relationship the mind has to, like what's the worst thing that can happen? Does your mind jump to, I'm cutting off the blood circulation and it's gonna, my foot's gonna, explode or whatever, right? I mean, there's a lot of, my mind's gone to a lot of weird places around physical pain. So the first thing is to kind of investigate. And then the second might be to mindfully kind of adjust to see and to not rush to movement. That's the thing, to not like rush to relief, but to use it as a opportunity to investigate what's your relationship to what's happening in your in the body, in the leg, in the foot, Is it tolerable? Could you tolerate a little bit more? It's just very fruitful to be able to tolerate discomfort because life is full of it. In case you didn't notice, Of course, it's not really a deep wisdom, but it is a deep wisdom because we're so conditioned to, when there's a itch, scratch it. When there's some discomfort in the body, move, adjust, find the pleasurable balance, the good moment, mentally and physically and emotionally. I don't want to feel this. I want to feel this. So this practice, the first part is to learn to, embrace what's happening, investigate with a curious mind, knowing that you can move, of course, I used to think that you couldn't move. I started in a Zen practice. And there was all these stories of people getting smacked with boards and bamboo sticks, and you know you can't move. You have to be like a statue. You were, and actually I started in a martial arts practice when I really formally started meditation, and so it was really like I had this kind of really austere kind of, this is what you do. You know, you sit like a statue, and I still have my feet, so you know, but they definitely were screaming at me at times. But as I got older, I started to realize that that's not the, you know, it's helpful. It can be helpful, but it's not the way. It's part of the journey, but not the destination. You know, to try to kind of totally I mean, that's what the Buddha was like. I'm trying to totally disconnect from my body. He tried that by doing austere practices. Because the mind is like, I'm uncomfortable. I need comfort now. I need comfort now, and that may be true. And then can you, you know, like, so to play with, so just for you as a personal challenge to kind of play with the edge the next time that that happens, and see like, okay, can I hang in here for 10 more breaths before moving, and then do 10 more breaths, and then then check in again, you know. And maybe it's a subtle movement, like I just made a subtle movement a few minutes ago, where where it's like, oh, what if I just, you know, just do a subtle shift, and then see how that changes. Blood just rushed into my foot just by doing a subtle change. Now, if that doesn't work, well, then maybe a little bigger of a change. So it becomes the practice. Let go of the breath, or have the breath be in the background, just like we are with thoughts, just like we are with sounds. This is I'm really glad that you asked this question, because it's so practical and such deep teaching, that such insight can be found just from that. And, you know, if it becomes where it's like, yeah, no, this is painful, right? Yeah, standing up, do standing meditation, let the blood rush back and the feeling come back. Usually what happens when you're sitting in this kind of posture is there's two nerves. I think they're connected to the sciatic nerve. I'm not totally sure, but they're kind of right at the sit bones and just a little into the kind of crease of the thigh. And if you don't sit forward enough in a cushion like this, you just pinch those nerves, and then those nerves you just start to feel the sensations, but it's really just the nerve pinch. And if you make a subtle adjustment to take the pressure off that nerve, then it lets go of the alarm. It turns off the alarm that says, move your leg or you're going to lose it. It's going to fall off. It's going to atrophy. I've gotten lost, and my leg is going to atrophy, and I'm not going to be able to use it again. And I also know people who sat way longer than they needed to in pain and hurt themselves, like literally blew their knee out, or like their I had a sacrum kind of issue at one point. And this is why chairs are great too, because, you know, takes off some of the pressure, but not all. You know, lots to be found there in that kind of investigation. Thanks for that. Mm-hmm. So what I was going to talk about, or what I was thinking about talking about, is to start a bit. I think last week we kind of got into this like skillful, unskillful. Did we talk about that last week? Skillful, unskillful kind of habits of mind, mental formations. Which basically, I think we ended up with talking about the precepts, the 5 training precepts as given by the Buddha. And an integral part of the Eightfold Path, which was laid out by Siddhartha Gautama. And sometimes they call them training rules, sometimes they call them precepts. I think of them as ways to be in personal integrity and to reduce karmic momentum, negative karmic momentum. But then I was thinking about, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Buddhism almost was completely wiped off the face of the earth. Let's see, 100, 200, maybe 300 years, no, maybe 500 years after the Buddha died, India was invaded by, I think, the Mughal Empire. I think that's what they're called. Basically came in for, kind of Middle Eastern, kind of came over through Pakistan and just killed everyone they saw. Just, invaded India, which was mostly peaceful, Hindu, Buddhist, Jainism, by the way, I don't think it exists anymore, maybe philosophically, but that's about it. Jainism were this very Puritan group of kind of they're kind of like a Hindu Buddhist group. And they were so like non-harming, they didn't wear clothes. Because the manufacture of clothing killed bugs, they only ate things that they could pick from the ground. Like they just had these really stringent, like non-harm. They took non-harm to the extreme, They only ate plants, and it was just like, I don't even know. But anyway, they were one of the first to be. They were so passive and so like zero carbon footprint, that they were like extinguished very quickly. And Hindus and Buddhists were being just because this other group had more of a power, and they're very similar to our kind of United States kind of view, right? Or what's very common actually in the world, this kind of theistic view of I'm right, you're wrong, and so I'm going to kill you and take your land. I'm better, you're worse. So you don't have a right to exist. So, and this, sweeping through India, and there were a small faction that kind of escaped and went to Sri Lanka, which is an island way off to the opposite side of where the invaders were kind of coming through. And then a group of, I don't even know, they were kind of like a cusp between Indians and Pakistanis along the Punjabi border. They just became this warrior class. They took it on, and these are known as Sikhism, another major religion in India. And the Sikhs were like, we're not gonna just like let this invading force just kill off our whole, people. And so they stepped up. And Sikhs often get confused for other kind of Middle Eastern, because they wear turbans and they have beards, and they always carry like a knife or a sword as part of their duty. And the Sikhs had a very strong ethical integrity. They didn't drink alcohol. They didn't, so they had precepts, but their precepts didn't include not protecting life. It was protecting life, their own, their families, their neighbors, and they fought, and they would fight against the invading forces, saving basically Hinduism and Buddhism, the Sikhs. When I was in India, I met a lot of Sikhs, yeah. And they were great. They are great. They're wonderful people. So I think about that because I was thinking about the extremes of like Jainism doesn't exist anymore, pretty much, wiped out. Buddhism almost gone. Hinduism was able to rebuild. They had the numbers. And so we can get kind of, in Buddhism, we can get kind of caught up sometimes in the words of things, like, following the precepts. And I think they're useful. One of the things about Buddhism, I think, it can feel a little kind of hands off, a little kind of, some people kind of say woo woo sometimes, or like, a little just kind of missing the point. Because a lot of what the Buddha taught is considered super mundane teachings, super mundane, beyond the realm of the fucking day to day. Like, let's try to expand our awareness, like I was kind of guiding us to. Let's point inward and settle what's happening here. And that's beautiful. Altruistic joy, altruistic principles, I think beautiful. But not when someone's trying to kill you. Not when someone's trying to harm others. So there's the mundane, which is all the shit that most of us care about most of the time. Jobs and family and friends and loved ones and people having a choice, having autonomy. We care about these things. Some care more than others, And so this balance between the mundane, the like daily, and the super mundane, the maybe ideal. Sometimes it's called the universal truth and practical truth. Because there's all this stuff, right? Roe v. Wade got overturned, and there's wars and all kinds of shit's going on all the time. And that sucks. Even though it doesn't necessarily affect me personally, because I don't have a female body, that my rights were just removed. It's pretty heavy. What I was just reflecting on is I remember being in jail and being told when to go to sleep and when to wake up, and I had every right stripped from me, except for maybe my right to existence, but that was in threat. So precepts, non-harming at its core. Do no harm. And then there's, the popular meme, but take no shit, which I love. I wish I would have come up with it, but I didn't. I just saw it on Instagram or some shit. Do no harm, but take no shit. I love it because it's so true. And we wouldn't even be here talking about the teachings of the Buddha if the Sikhs didn't take no shit. And if other factions, within Buddhism didn't fight from, invading factors and whatnot. Just another fun fact about that. In Thailand, so Thailand is one of, it's, 98% Buddhist. One of the most violent arts, martial arts in the world comes out of Thailand, which is why I went there in the first place. I was like, how is this happening? I wanted to know. And Thailand, which used to be Siam, Cambodia on one side, Vietnam, Laos, and then Burma on the other side, it used to be all one land. And then it began to get kind of, separated off and became these other independent countries. And all the other countries have been colonized in some way, except for Thailand. Thailand has never been conquered, is still a kingdom. I found that really interesting. Maintaining Buddhist principles, yet fighting when necessary. Now, I'm not saying I think we should all go out and hurt people. But to protect life, we sometimes need to stand up for that, for what we believe in, for what's the greater good. And there's lots of different ways, people have been yelling a lot. I think there's been a lot of yelling this last week, holding signs. And I think if that's the way that works for you, But it just sucks that this kind of, just kind of disregard for basic human rights of autonomy. But it's happened forever. So from a Buddhist perspective, how do we hold both the challenges that we face in our life and then also maintain, and the atrocities that happen in the world, and maintain our own ethical integrity? And each of us has to find out what that is. What is your ethical integrity? From a Buddhist perspective, if you want to end suffering in your life, protect life, yours or others. This word ahimsa means do no harm. So to do that in a way that is non-harming, if possible, to not steal because of the karmic implications of killing and stealing. To be wise and careful with our sexuality. In other words, to be non-harming with your sexual energy, non-harming towards self and others. And I think that in some ways, this kind of, abortion issue can really fall into this being wise around our sexual energy. What I mean by that is we all have to decide for ourselves what our integrity is around, what our choices are. It's not up to governments or even religions, really, to make that up. But people take that on and have to come up with what their own ethical integrity is. But from just even a more practical, this idea of kind of being wise and careful with sexuality. And I mean, the Buddhism, the Buddha made it really simple. If you're a monk or a nun, you don't just give it up, renounce sex completely. But for the rest of us, I tried to renounce it a few times. I wished I could renounce it a few more times. And I think the reality is finding a healthy balance if you're not going to renounce completely. And then to be wise and careful with our speech. Again, this doesn't mean be passive. This doesn't mean don't speak out. Don't speak truth to power, You have a question or? Oh, you were just scratching. I'll open up for questions in just a minute. I just wanted to get through the 5. So yeah. Speaking truth to power, I think, is necessary. I think this is why I bring up about, that there are warrior castes that need to rise to protect our rights. And, to find a way to do this that is causing the least harm. And a few weeks ago, I used to be, I was a bodyguard for a long time. I worked as a bodyguard and then I, like a bouncer and security, I just did all that kind of stuff. It was fun for a long time. And then it wasn't fun anymore. And it just felt not right. Like there was something in me that shifted, or even though I wasn't causing harm, I was actually protecting people. Something shifted where it just didn't feel like I wanted to put myself in that type of situation anymore. So I began to kind of take more of a vow of nonviolence. I did that for a number of years. I still have it, but don't try to attack me or you'll be in trouble. Maybe I'm getting old now, but I don't know. My point is, it's not always black and white. There's the mundane, there's the super mundane, and then how do we live in the space in between? How do we hold altruistic ideals and deal with our neighbors and our friends and our families? This is the real dharma. It's how do these two things exist? Because we can talk about the ideals all fucking day long, but that doesn't matter when someone cuts you off on the freeway, or someone tries to take your rights away. or someone tries to hurt your family, or, whatever the thing is. And then the fifth precept, is basically like a safety measure. Okay, like if you are someone that drinks and does drugs, chances are you're going to cloud your judgment, and all of those other precepts that you just thought were a great idea are going to go out the window. That's basically what the fifth precept is like. All right, so yes, 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 and don't cloud your mind. Don't live in a way that is heedless. That's several of the translations really say, like, don't ingest substances that cloud the mind. Or learn to be heedful of the other four precepts. And the idea is that, the bottom line is that the Buddha, just like sex, was like, yeah, so just don't do it. And in the time of the Buddha, and still today, they have what's called chilam, which is hash, basically. Probably came over from Pakistan or Nepal, maybe, I don't know. I think I remember some Nepali brown when I was a kid, like smoking some Nepali brown hash. But yeah, drugs have been there, present, clouded. And again, what's your ethical integrity? We all have to figure that one out. That's what I love about Buddhism. Buddhism doesn't say, do this, don't do this. Nowhere have I ever read. I've read translations from some stuffy old fucking British dudes that would say, this is what it says, don't do this and do this. But the reality is, it's see for yourself. We all have to figure out our own salvation, so to speak, and our own line of ethical integrity. Now, the Buddha was pretty clear, like these 5 precepts will, along with meditation, will lead to the end of suffering. If you follow these 5 precepts, non-killing, non-stealing, being wise with your sexuality, not lying, being dishonest, causing harm with your words, and abstaining from substances, you will reduce suffering dramatically. That's what they say. And then meditate. Anyway, that's kind of like, maybe I'll unpack that a little bit more into the future. Maybe I'll take each one. Maybe next week I'll talk about, non-harming, protecting life a little bit more. I don't know, is there any kind of thoughts, questions, disagreements?
I know I've already spoken once.
It's okay, Mike. It's all right.
This just falls nicely into a conversation Sev and I were having a week or 2 ago. But I wonder, and maybe this is a large one to pose towards the later part of the class, but is there a place for, in Buddhism, and or does it serve a purpose, guilt?
Great question. So I think you guys heard it because the words came up. So did you guys hear the question? Yeah, great. Guilt. Yeah, the Buddha calls it hari and opata. Hari meaning kind of guilt, remorse, and opata meaning kind of shame or regret. Or maybe it's guilt, regret, remorse, shame. Actually, I think that's what these two words, which the Buddha called the great guardians of the world. In other words, if we don't feel ashamed or guilty or regret of our misdeeds, then there's no room for growth. And basically, we're fucking sociopaths, right? So it's the coming to, oh, wow, I just stepped out of integrity so hard that I feel it in my heart and in my gut, and it fucking hurts. And I don't want to feel this way again. And the opata, so that's hari, that's the kind of guilt, remorse perhaps, guilt, regret. And then the kind of shame is like I've stepped out of integrity, not only for myself, but also for my community or my culture. Now, I think that these are only useful in the moment. And that guilt held on to for too long is just poison. And I think that shame internalized and held on to for too long is a poison. And then it just permeates, right? And there's so much internalized shame. I used to hear it all the time. Shame on you. Fuck that. I think my generation probably maybe was the last generation to get that. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's some grandparents out there still wagging their finger. But I remember when I was a kid, any adult on the street would stop and say, shame on you for throwing rocks or whatever the hell I was doing. Usually throwing rocks at windows. I was just trying to break random windows in barns and stuff. Like I liked to do that when I was a kid. I also set some random fires, but anyway, we're not going to get into that. Shame on you, I got a lot. And maybe you did too. And there's some kind of internalization of like, oh, you're out of integrity, which I think can be useful. But the internalization of like, I'm a bad person, which I think that's what that kind of shame on you and the societal can, if we internalize it, can just really cause havoc. I call it toxic shame. Shame spirals, guilt spirals as well. There's a lot of kind of psychological kind of layers to that. But so from the Buddhist perspective, I went off on a bit of a tangent, but from a Buddhist perspective, guilt is useful in the moment that it is really identifying stepping out of our integrity. And usually means there's some corrective action. And same thing with regret, remorse. Now we can feel remorse for something that we've done or that has happened. I feel remorseful for, these fucking Supreme Court judges. I'm upset about it and what they did and, just how much bullshit that was rippling out because of it. Even though wasn't my actions. That's interesting. That's an interesting thing because there's also such thing as like white guilt, white shame, male guilt, male shame, female, there's like separations around this shit too.
What was that? You said Hari?
Hari and Opata, it's like H-I-R-I and Opata is O-P-H-A-T-T-A, I think. I mean, if you just Google that shit, you'll get it. Hari and Opata, great guardians of the world. Anyone else that's not Mike? How about the other Mike? Yeah, Severie.
So I've been definitely having a lot of feelings and thoughts around the Supreme Court ruling myself, and I'm really grateful that you brought it up today. You're always so good about bringing up like real world stuff and acknowledging it, and that's so helpful when we're all experiencing the outside world in different ways. So something I've been thinking about as we're moving to Florida is wanting to live in the Eightfold Path, following the five precepts, and knowing that I'm going to come across all kinds of new and different opposition. It may be with strangers, it may be with friends, it may be with family. And when I say opposition, I mean to my personal beliefs around it, because in their minds, they are projecting their own personal beliefs around it. So I've been trying to navigate, like, at some point in my life, I'm just realizing that if you don't share values that allow me to feel safe and allow me to feel like I can thrive as a human being, then I don't need you around. That kind of runs, I feel like, a little counter to some of what we talk about in this Sangha, in this space, which is being open to dialogue even with people who are opposing, and not taking things personally, and being able to remove some of those like really like emotional attachments that we have. So how do I balance those, like, wanting to be, this is what you're talking about, the two
the mundane and the super mundane.
Like, how do I find, is it okay, I guess, is really the question, to just say, you know what, if you don't share my values, like, I don't have space for you.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Absolutely, it's okay. Matter of fact, I think it's requested, I mean, and actually there's tons of teachings around, like, don't associate with fools. Associate with the wise. Don't, continue to put yourself in harm's way. Like, then you're the fool, But we're also not going to change anyone's fucking mind.
Well, right, and I'm not trying to do that anymore.
Right.
So it's like, I need to be willing to walk away.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, talk to my conservative family members about politics or religion, Why? Why would I do that? That would just defeat the purpose.
You don't think you can change people's minds? I've done that all the time.
Say more.
I converted a white supremacist once. I'm dead serious.
I believe you.
She had a good heart. She was saying horrible stuff, but she had a good heart. It was because it was her parents taught her horrible things. She talked to me because she thought my hair was fake. That's what piqued her interest.
Right.
And it was funny because she thought her hair was fake, and she told me, "Oh, I've never spoken to a black person before." And then I just let her talk. I didn't go off on her for saying anything horrible. I was just listening, and I was like, "Okay, here's why that's not true. Here's why that isn't." And then you put the chink in the armor. She comes back. She talks to me 2 weeks later, and she was like, "My parents lied to me."
So that's a great example. Thanks for bringing it up, Ramana. That's a great example of not opposing the view, but allowing and then actually just like from being who you are, right? That's what I'm hearing. And the color skin that you have, or the ethnicity, or the background, or whatever, just being who you are, you were able to shift this person's perspective. Not because you changed their mind, you helped them to see the flaws in their own thinking. That's what I hear from you, right? Instead of arguing, you weren't arguing. Although it sounds like you were pointing out some very key facts of whatever.
I was picking apart what she's saying. I just
Right.
wasn't being aggressive.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that that's great if there's dialogue that can be had. And if there's not dialogue, I'm sure you've also met some white supremacists that you would never change their mind.
Oh, yeah.
I have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Some of them have been in my family. So what do you do with that? You have to figure it out. Yeah. Good point, though. I appreciate what you're saying. Because there is that space for dialogue, like you're kind of putting out, and this is the space, and is there that room for dialogue? And if there isn't, well, then we have to know that. Yeah. Yes, Shannon.
Just a statement, to follow up on what everyone else has said, I found that there's always room for the conversations. There's just not room for the people in my life.
Mm-hmm. Like
the
conversation can be had, but not necessarily, you're not inviting them to the barbecue.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we can have the conversations, we can talk things out. I can hear your side because I can always find someone's perspective, whether it's a faith-based, how they were raised, like, regardless, I can meet the person where they're at, but I don't need to give them access to me or my energy. And that's just a boundary I've had to set up to keep my to keep my vow of nonviolence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, there can be, and very often, and there's lots of. So maybe we'll actually expand on this a little bit more next week. This kind of, because there's lots of teachings about how to live in community with people you disagree with. Because believe me, monasteries are not peaceful. They are wrought with conflict. It's just everyone's have shaved head and robes, but they're like wanting to stab each other in the throat. Serious. Shit gets crazy. But we'll pick that up next week. Gotta go now. See you next week. Okay, you too, Roger. All right, you guys. Time to end. Please know that there is Donna donation here. You can put it in the bowl. You can use the scanner on the bowl for donating to the center, or to me. You can Venmo me, Jason Murphy, or No BS Buddhist, either one. You can send me a PayPal too, but I don't check my PayPal ever, so I don't even know how to get into my PayPal. So Venmo works best. Anyway, let's just all the goodness, gathering all the goodness of our practice. This is a worthy endeavor to free our own hearts and minds so that all beings may be free, all beings may be happy, all beings may live in peace.